NASCAR fires back at Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr., and other recent criticism of the next-gen car. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. I don't really consider myself a journalist, at least not in the traditional sense, but I do try to remain as unbiased as possible on this show. I try to tell every angle of every story. Now, I might side more with one side or the other, but I at least try to be fair to all parties. And that's what I'm gonna do today. Yesterday we talked about Denny Hamlin, other drivers who've recently criticized the next gen. Today we're reacting to NASCAR's response. But before we get to that, we have to thank today's sponsor. 1821 Man-Made offers top shelf grooming goods for the aspiring gentleman. Inspired by Prohibition-era bootleggers, the 1821 Barrel House empowers men to be the gentleman they aspire to be through professional-grade grooming products and lifestyle wisdom. They sent me a few products to try out for myself, including their Man-Made Wash, which is available in 4 legendary scents. They sent me their lightweight conditioning oil for beard, hair, and skin, which is available in 3 different scents. They also sent me some Spirit Spritzer body spray. Ooh, I shouldn't have sprayed that at the camera. What do I do? Spray it on myself. Oh, that's good though. You can head over to 1821manmade.com. That link is down in the description below to pick up some of these premium goods for yourself. Also, be sure to use code 1821NASCAR at checkout to save 20% off your entire purchase. Thanks to 1821 Man-Made for sponsoring the show. The focus of this video is really to serve as a follow-up to yesterday's video. Yesterday, we reacted to Denny Hamlin's tweet about needing a next-gen 2.0. We talked about the many issues that have cropped up this year with the next-gen, including some of the recent struggles at Bristol Motor Speedway. That was the whole topic yesterday. Today, NASCAR responded. VP of Competition Scott Miller went on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, and I want to play you some of what he said and read some other quotes.
Bristol is definitely a unique load case, and some things cropped up with the steering that weren't expected, but with the newness of this car and the newness of everything, it's not acceptable to have problems, but it's probably part of the learning process for us all.
And he's kind of saying 2 different things. Sort of. He's saying on one hand it's not acceptable to have problems, but on the other hand, I mean, this is all part of the learning curve. I guess what he's saying is it's not acceptable. We're going to work to solve those problems. That's part of the learning process. So I think I know what he's trying to say. Typical corporate speak. I want to play you this next soundbite though, because he did go on and directly address the recent t-shirt selling quotes from Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr. Here's what that sounded like.
All the teams and OEMs were involved in the RFP process when we chose the parts. So, everybody's got a stake in this, and, it's not just NASCAR choosing quote unquote crappy parts.
What does RFP process mean? Because I had to look it up. It means request for proposal. Effectively, it's an official way to solicit bids from contractors for an upcoming project or product you have. So Scott Miller is saying there that while no, the teams do not build their own parts and pieces so much these days, they did play an important role in choosing who would construct the various parts. That's what he's saying, at least for what it's worth. I did go back while I was Googling what RFP stood for. I did find a quote from Roush president Steve Newmark at the beginning of 2020. I found this in racer.com, where he said, quote, NASCAR has involved us in every step of the way on these RFPs, on the single source suppliers, on the rules for this year. And then he goes on and on. But back in 2020, the teams were saying that, hey, NASCAR is working with us on finding these new single source suppliers. Now that was early 2020, back when they were still talking about 2021 being the launch of the next gen. So perhaps some things changed. This is even before COVID, that quote was taken. But anyway, there you have Scott Miller from NASCAR directly addressing and in some ways rebuking the crappy parts narrative pushed by Harvick and recently Martin Truex Jr. Scott Miller did go on and continued to admit that many of the parts failures seen at Bristol are not acceptable. Here's what he said, quote, are we looking to improve when we have problems? We absolutely 100% are every single day. What happened at Bristol was not acceptable. We will diligently work to come up with a solution to where that doesn't happen again. So there's NASCAR's response. Look, I don't want to cut NASCAR too much slack. Ultimately, they designed these cars. They took much of the R&D out of the team's hands. They now do it themselves with the help of their vendors and suppliers and all the research that went in the last couple of years. Ultimately, this is NASCAR's car. So I'm not going to cut them slack for design shortcomings or failures or issues on the racetrack. But I am going to cut NASCAR slack in this respect. This is the first year of a brand new car that was largely developed through simulation during pandemic conditions. It was never going to be perfect day one. It was always going to be a long-term investment, a work in progress. I want to look back at a quote I read to you yesterday from Brad Keselowski. He said this past weekend, "If the next gen looks exactly the same next year, then we failed." That's what Brad Keselowski said. He says he's brought that to NASCAR. I think NASCAR shares the exact same view. So what we see on track today is not exactly what will be on track next season. They will continue to make edits every generation of NASCAR stock car, going back to the Gen 4, the car tomorrow, of course, even the Gen 6, underwent significant changes throughout their lifetime. The reason NASCAR's faced heavier criticism, especially from drivers lately, is because it's the playoffs. Every race, every lap is put under the microscope. And the unfortunate truth of racing largely a spec car is that when a part fails and knocks you out of a race, like what happened to Kevin Harvick at Darlington, it's not really the team's fault. They were using parts that NASCAR forced them to use and would not let them touch in any significant way. So it's very frustrating for the competitors. Kevin Harvick had and still has every right to be upset with the fire that took him out at Darlington. It certainly did not help his playoff efforts. The racing at Bristol this past weekend was not up to Bristol short track standards. What needs to be changed? I don't know. More horsepower? Take off the entire underbody, the underwing? A different Goodyear tire combo? That's probably a good place to start. None of these changes are going to happen overnight. There's only 6-7 weeks to go in the season. We're talking about 2023 at this point for many of these significant potential changes. NASCAR is big. And big companies are notoriously slow to react to or fix things that need to be fixed. That's been the case with NASCAR for decades and decades and decades. It's not a new thing. I think many of the concerns the past few weeks have been blown a bit out of proportion. That's just my opinion. I'm not that worried about things like tires. Goodyear's hit on it some this year. They've missed on it some. That's just always going to be the case. I'm not really worried about short tracks. I'm convinced that at least by the offseason, NASCAR will have made some changes to the short track rules that we likely won't see a repeat of Martinsville this past spring. I am worried about how the cars crash, especially rear impacts, potentially injuring drivers and knocking them out of races, as we saw with Kurt Busch, and I don't think that's an easy fix that'll happen overnight. That may take longer than just one offseason, I don't know. But I'm not worried that NASCAR is ignoring most of these issues. Maybe the safety one could be a slightly higher priority, but NASCAR's already proven in the last couple weeks that they are listening to concerns from drivers. They proved this a couple weeks ago when they implemented some fixes to try and stop the fires that have been breaking out. Again, this is the first year of an all-new car that was largely tested during pandemic conditions, and it's done extremely well this season. Look, good racing is subjective. Everyone has a different opinion on that. But what I can say is that this year has seen a record-tying 19 different winners. Teams like Trackhouse, 2311, RCR, RFK, Petty GMS are able to compete with the big boys. We've seen attendance increases all year long. We've seen ratings increases all year up until the last couple of weeks. Reporter Jeff Gluck's infamous "Was It a Good Race" poll has seen a record number of 90% plus positive scores. So again, what is good racing is very subjective, but I just provided several metrics that would indicate the majority of fans are very happy with what they've seen on track this season, generally speaking. It's far from perfect, but to call for a completely new car, Next Gen 2.0, rather than just call for a few fixes of things that do need to be fixed at specific types of tracks, to me seems like a bit much. Bristol was not acceptable racing. Martinsville earlier this year, not an acceptable product. But NASCAR's proven in the last year, whether it's raising the horsepower at the very last minute, whether it's implementing fixes to try and prevent fires in the cockpit, whether it's adding North Wilkesboro Speedway back as the all-star race, while they might move slowly sometimes, NASCAR is listening. I think the dialogue around this topic has been cluttered up by just so much nonsense recently. Many aren't able to see the clear, bigger picture. I don't know, that's just my take. Feel free to disagree down in the comment section below. I've tried to cover both sides. Yesterday, drivers, today, NASCAR. Let me know where you align. That's gonna do it for this episode. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button down below so you don't miss any future NASCAR content. As always, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters as well. I couldn't do this show without your tremendous and very generous support. I greatly appreciate it. We'll be back again very, very soon. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy, y'all.